Hello, everyone. My name is Brian Wesley Johnson, and thank you for holding on. We had some technical difficulties here, some audio technical difficulties, and we had to take time to get it straightened out so you could hear us. Um, Hello, my name is Brian Wesley Johnson, and on behalf of Soulivity Magazine and Beyond Words Publishing, I want to welcome you to another Truth and Power series event broadcasting live right here on Soulivity TV. We developed this series to bring together our national and international communities to discuss, debate, and create solutions to affect positive impact in our world. It is about inspiring and achieving the dream of more equality and equity, which results in true freedom for all of us. This is our mission here at Soulivity. We are an inclusive community dedicated to supporting everyone and living their best life by battling fear and ignorance wherever it may live. And today we have such a very special event. We are holding a celebration and discussion in honor of Earth Day. We'll be talking about how we can be even more connected to our planet and how that connection creates better outcomes for everyone. And as part of this event, we have a wonderful new charitable partner. We are trying to raise money to support earthday.org in reaching its goals for the 2021 year. And if you are led, please donate what you can and support the people and this great organization whose mission is to diversify, educate, and activate the environmental movement worldwide.
This April 22nd marks the 51st Earth Day. Earth Day is held in over 190 countries with billions of participants worldwide. The movement has come a long way since its start in 1970. The first Earth Day drew 20 million participants through grassroots organizing and left a powerful impact in its wake, including the passage of key environmental protections in the United States.
And you saw the quick succession of environmental laws the passage of those laws taking place, like Endangered Species Act and Clean Air Act and Toxic Control Act and a bunch of other ones that had been sitting out forever, never going anywhere. But those 20 million people scared everybody, all the people in power. And so you saw this enormous interest in the environment that was sustained over long periods of time.
Since then, years of environmental damage and climate change have produced many harmful effects and lasting impacts. Now more than ever, we need to restore our Earth.
In climate change, there's been discussion for decades now on, we have to mitigate the damage or we have to adapt to the damage. But restoration is a different concept altogether, and it talks about basically recreating systems that are incredibly degraded now, but could serve as a way to restore the planet generally.
Restore Our Earth is Earth Day's 2021 theme and promotes the natural processes, green technologies, and innovative thinking to restore the world's ecosystems. The 5 main campaigns that earthday.org runs year-round are climate literacy, Global Earth Challenge, regenerative agriculture, the Canopy Project, and the Great Global Cleanup. Through these campaigns, restoring our Earth is accessible and the vision for the future. Climate literacy is one of the ways earthday.org plans to build awareness around climate change and prepare future generations to be the face of a greener workforce.
Climate literacy is important for us, for jobs, for voting, and for civic engagement, tool building, as well as just really understanding the complexities of climate change and how do we solve them.
Climate education doesn't stop at the classroom door. Through earthday.org's Global Earth Challenge app, users can be citizen scientists through their smartphone. The app allows users to help scientists track insect, plastic pollution, food supply, and air quality data. Earthday.org also works on the ground to help restore our Earth. Since 2010, the Canopy Project has planted tens of millions of trees across the globe to combat deforestation. To reduce waste and plastic pollution, the Great Global Cleanup encourages group and solo cleanup efforts to reduce litter in communities across the globe. The Regenerative Agriculture Campaign promotes farming and grazing practices that help reverse climate change. These practices can transform farmers into environmental and societal heroes. Personal actions alongside commitments from leaders can create collective change that will restore our Earth. This Earth Day and every day, earthday.org calls on you to make positive actions in your community. Every action will help restore our Earth.
And so with that, let's introduce our phenomenal panel. Let me start with Claudia WELSS. Claudia WELSS is the chair of the Institute of Noetic Sciences, or IONS, and with the Global Inherence Initiative. She is also founding chair of Invest Yourself at Nexus Global Youth Summit and Network, bridging practical consciousness research with philanthropy, impact investing, activism, and social innovation. As a funder and a citizen scientist, Claudia advises experimental projects with the potential to accelerate large-scale change like World Future Coin, HeartMath's Global Inherence Initiative, and the Flow Genome Project. Welcome, Claudia.
Thank you, Brian.
Next is Tracey RITCHIE. Tracey RITCHIE joined earthday.org as the Director of Education in January 2018. Most recently, she was adjunct faculty at the University of Florida, and has held positions from Florida to North Carolina, managing and facilitating environmental education programs. Tracey holds a PhD from the University of Florida, where she focused on developing systems thinking skills in students and teachers to more effectively communicate about complex environmental issues such as climate change. Welcome, Tracey.
Thanks so much, Brian.
And last but not least, we're going to welcome CATRIONA MACGREGOR. CATRIONA has led Vision Quest and Nature Quest for 20 years in the US and Scotland, benefiting participants from 8 countries. She also managed the largest coastal sanctuary in the United States, stretching over 600 miles. This program led to the comeback of an endangered species and was awarded the Blue Ribbon in Conservation by a former US president. Her book, Partner Claudia, and welcome on and all. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for your patience. Wow, what a first kickoff for Earth Day.
This is great.
I'm gonna start off by reminding all our people out there that listen, this is an interactive discussion, so we want your participation. So please post any questions for our guest or comments about the topics right to our live feeds. During our Q&A sessions, we'll have our guests respond. So get to posting, everybody. So, CATRIONA, I'm going to start with you. Earth Day began in 1970 with the knowledge that we as a world weren't paying enough attention to our environment. Do you think we played enough attention over all these decades?
No, and it's not just my opinion, but we have seen dramatic changes. Oh, okay.
There you go.
Yeah, no, and it's not just my opinion. I've been working in this field for over 40 years, but through my media program, Earthscope Media, I had the honor of interviewing hundreds and hundreds of leading scientists here in the US and internationally. And there's really just about unanimous agreement that global climate change is occurring. And, we still have polluting industries and so forth. So since the 70s, unfortunately, things have even rolled back, because in the 1990s, there was even more agreement among the population that climate change was occurring. And that's what you need. You need people agreeing and understanding the situation. And unfortunately, a major campaign was launched by the oil industries to confuse people and pretend that, you know, it wasn't really man-made, it wasn't really happening. And that's rolled things back for us. But the good news is that because it is man-made, we have an ability to change this. We have an ability to do something about it. And I look forward to talking about that too.
Wow, thank you for that. Do any of, like Claudia, how do you feel about this? Do you think we paid enough attention?
Oh boy, no. And actually, CATRIONA just said that in the 90s there was greater awareness than there is now. And I was sort of nodding inside because I remember my big wake up, besides I had an intuitive understanding that the world wasn't working for everyone. Nature was my sanity. So I also had an intuitive feeling for what was happening to nature. But it was in 1992 when I read the Union of Concerned Scientists' Warning to Humanity, which was 1,700 unanimous opinions of scientists, including Nobel laureates, that we had about 20 years to turn things around, and that humanity was on a collision course with nature. So yes, there was a greater awareness in the 90s. I also feel like because of where I'm situated at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, we were founded by Apollo 14 astronaut and sixth man to walk on the moon, Captain Edgar Mitchell. And through knowing him and what happened to him in space, his own epiphany, looking at Earth from the lens of space and seeing the oneness of this planet and knowing actually what was happening on the ground, that we weren't acting like we were one people on one planet at all. It just reminds me that the Earthrise image, if you remember Apollo 8, took the famous Earthrise image in 1968, and that was such a huge awareness raiser and fuel for Earth Day and all the other amazing initiatives that happened in the early 70s, like Clean Air and Clean Water Act, Endangered Species Act, EPA, et cetera, et cetera. So we did have this burst of awareness, and then, well, CATRIONA explained it, vested interests, I guess. But the wonderful thing is, I feel like when we were talking while we were waiting for the program to come online, the awareness has come back around, and the receptivity for what needs to happen now is really great.
Wow. What about you, Tracey? I mean, as the director of education at Earth Day, I mean, you probably have to tell people this arc, right? You have to show people the arc that has been happening. Do you think we paid enough attention?
I think enough is the tricky word there. I don't want to discount or discredit any of the achievements we've had since the first Earth Day in 1970, but it definitely needs to be more pervasive, and it definitely needs to be more accessible. I think one of the key elements we've been missing this entire time is universally and formally embedding this kind of education into our school systems around the world. There are fantastic teachers and educators in the school systems and in non-formal institutions like zoos, aquariums, museums, but not every single student is getting access to that kind of education. And I think, you know, working with students when they're younger, when their worldviews are still malleable and they're still forming, and understanding just how intricate and complex our environmental systems are, and to really understand how we are connected to those systems and those systems are connected to us. If we had more of that robust education for every single student, I think we'd be in a much better place. And that's one of our key campaigns right now, is trying to make sure that every student has access to that kind of education. So it's not just from those star teachers that have this as a true passion, or from those wealthier schools that have a bit more resources to take kids outside or go on field trips. Every student needs to have and develop that connection to nature, that stewardship ethic, and that just innate understanding of how our actions impact the earth every day.
Well, you know, I'm glad you brought up some of the things that earthday.org is doing, because there's something specifically that I love about your mission. And, you know, when people think about conservation, right, these environmental issues, they can think of it as in a very narrow way, right? but Earth Day is trying to change that, right? EarthDay.org is trying to fight that. Tell us a little bit more about what you're doing to expand that definition out a little bit.
Absolutely. I think, there's some misconceptions and maybe just some misinformation about who should be an environmentalist and who currently is an environmentalist or an environmental activist or a climate activist. Some of these labels that we've put on the youth trying to, advocate for a healthy and sustainable future, or people who attended the first Earth Days. I think there's still this crunchy hippie persona that they think. I know I heard an analogy a long time ago that someone identified themselves as the green sheep of their family. So it was, the one at Thanksgiving that's talking about more plant-based meals, or, talking about recycling. There's so much opportunity, and for every single person to identify as an environmentalist or a caretaker or a steward or an activist for a healthy life. And so that needs to be no matter what your profession, from a janitor to a doctor to a plumber to an accountant. Everyone needs to understand their impact on this world, and how they connect to people and how they connect to the planet. And that I'm hoping that it's not just a label anymore, and that it's just universal, that everyone has a vested interest in having clean water, clean air, shelter, and a sustainable future. And so if we could remove that label and just have everybody identify as an environmentalist, and a human on this planet, that we could work together to take better care of it.
Right. CATRIONA, you have really dedicated your entire life to this concept, in my opinion. I mean, where the vision quest, the nature quest, so doing this sanctuary. I mean, you're a living example, in part what Tracey's kind of talking about. Can you tell us a little bit about that lifestyle for yourself? I mean, I'm so fascinated by the fact that it seems like from maybe an early age, you had this connection.
I did, and so I was called Nature Girl from a very young age, and that was a long time ago, and people thought I was really weird and told me I was unrealistic, and I'd say the trees can, we don't understand trees fully and what they can really do and so forth. And the first book I wrote when I was 6 was about a tree. So yeah, it's been a lifelong love. The other thing, though, is I really see this big link, going back to what Tracey was saying and what you were saying, so I've kind of moved and weaved from being what some would call it an environmental leader or conservation leader, working here and in 6 other countries in the world, to also understanding that as we lose nature, it affects us, it affects our soul, it affects human beings at a very deep level. And so that's when I began to lead these quests, helping people to connect to nature and to understand the fullness of nature that we're still just learning at this time. So I do both. I work on what I call the more advocacy side, conservation side, as well as helping people to connect. But to me, this is a universal issue, because the way that we treat nature is about a much deeper thing. It's about societal paradigms, economic paradigms. And the way that our economic paradigms work, which can be bad for people too, is bad for the environment. So actually what's happening to the earth is happening to many people. So we really need to relook at our entire society, how we value things or don't value things, why we value certain people or certain places or certain types of natural resources or nature. And so it's really a bigger picture. And so I think you're right. It is Earth Day. It's about the earth, and it's about human beings. And it's about valuing everyone, being equitable towards everyone. And our economic system is not equitable. I work with many indigenous and native peoples. And they have a lot of incredible value systems that I think behoove us to adopt some of those, you know, about sharing, caring about other people in your society, making sure we all rise equally together. And so it's about values. So I love trees, and I'm also very much motivated to help bring greater sense of our connection to all people as well as the planet.
Wow, thank you for that. And as you were talking about that, it really leads me to my next question, which is with Claudia, which is that this is about higher consciousness, right? I mean, this is about us understanding our role in, you know, in the planet, and the connectiveness that's there, and that we have a deep responsibility to connect with everything, right? Tell us about how this connects to ions, because when I think about ions, I'm thinking about one quote that is specific to that organization, and it's from Nikola Tesla. The day science begins to study non-physical phenomena, it will make more progress in one decade than in all the previous centuries of its existence. And everything that CATRIONA was kind of telling me about relates to this consciousness that we have to embody when it comes to looking at our world. Tell us about that part and how it's related to Earth Day.
Thank you. Well, first I would say we are all connected. Science is demonstrating that we are all connected with each other, with all life, and with the planet. So it's, for me, more about the quality of that connection than simply realizing that we're connected. And I'm going to answer that question by referring back to CATRIONA again, because she talked about the social and economic paradigms. And I want to add to that the scientific paradigm, because that is what we've been working on at IONS for almost 50 years. The current scientific paradigm, the materialist reductionist paradigm, tells us that we are separate from each other and from the planet. And in fact, the economic paradigm capitalism relies on this belief in separation in its current form. The mission of the Institute of Noetic Sciences is to reveal the true interconnected nature of reality using the current scientific method. And we are doing that along with other institutions and groups, and we're also realizing that we may have to innovate the scientific method as we do it, because what we're discovering about the nature of reality is that it doesn't exactly comport itself, it doesn't exactly reveal itself easily using traditional scientific methods. But this is super important because CATRIONA also mentioned values. And I think we're in this situation because we have built a world that doesn't include the values of the heart. And there is a relatively new science, the science of neurocardiology, that is all about how the heart connects us to everything around us, how it's an organ of perception, how we can actually use the intelligence of the heart to, as we say at IONS, have access to the higher spectrum frequencies of consciousness, like love and compassion, care, appreciation, gratitude. And how when we are at those frequencies, we enliven, the quality of our connection to everything around us becomes enlivened, becomes coherent, and we become a more coherent whole. And just to say there that it's like the whole becomes greater than the sum of our parts, which is not the world we're living in right now.
Right. Thank you for that. Wow. Since this is like the truth kind of part of our segment, there is like some good news that has happened like since Earth Day kind of started. And I found this article that was from last year by Smithsonian Magazine. And it's the 50 things we learned about Earth Day since the first Earth Day. And one of the things that they talk about was, it's really cute because I have nieces and nephews that would love that I'm mentioning this. The giant panda could be saved, right? And it was listed as endangered. It's still got a ways to go. It's vulnerable now, but we made a lot of progress in that amount of time, right? I mean, you got the panda watch and the panda cams and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to go to each one of you. What are some of the good things, the good news that each of you can share around these last 50 years since the first Earth Day that is important for people to know? And of course, I'm going to go to our resident expert, CATRIONA, to get her take on this.
Well, when I first started in the movement, when I was 12, I attended the first Environmental Defense Fund meeting. And, there were probably 5 environmental organizations that I could count at that time. And now there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. And also just going back to the way people interacted with me when I was a kid, when I talk about how amazing nature was and what it could do, what the trees could do, and people would dismiss me. Now there's a lot of people saying, you're right, CATRIONA, this is amazing. They just, there was a team of scientists that last year, they were from the UK, US, and I think Australia, and they couldn't understand why plants were so good at capturing photons and doing photosynthesis. Because, our solar panels, which mimic light, the photons that come in, about 60% of those bounce right off the panel. They're not even used. Only like 30 or 40% go in. But leaves absorb like 90%, and it doesn't make sense. It's a mathematical impossibility. So the scientists are like, how do trees do this? We don't understand. It's like magic. So they studied it, and they found out that trees actually sing for the light. They actually go into a certain frequency when they're doing photosynthesis, and it helps the photons. If you could imagine your plane, landing at the airport, and the guys with the lights, saying, hey, this way. Well, it's kind of like the plants are doing that. Isn't that amazing? So that's really cool. So going from where I was as a kid to, saying things like that to people saying, what, that's impossible, to nowadays, ions, Earth Day, people are like, yeah, nature is pretty powerful and amazing. And you know what? Nature can get us out of this mess if we just work with it. If we stop cutting the trees, start planting trees, start like really looking at natural processes, they can help us. We have to stop polluting too, but they can help us big time. And then all the incredible young people, Greta, who's out there, she's amazing. The young man who's cleaning up the oceans, he's amazing. There's some incredible people that are just doing fantastic things. So that's what gives me hope.
Wow. You were talking about the trees, and I was thinking about when I have many family that's in Southern California. And when the pandemic hit early last year, my uncle called, he took a picture, text messaged it to me, and then called me and said, Brian, I've never seen downtown LA where I could see it from where I am and it's clean and the blue sky. I've never seen that in my life. And it's because nature took over. Wow. When all the cars stopped and all the pollution was going in the air. Nature said, okay, time to get to work, I'm going to go to you, Tracey. What about you? What are some things that either you've learned or things that you see that have changed? Because I want to make sure that people are getting that, hey, we are moving. We may not be moving as fast as we want, but we are moving.
Exactly. And it's so important to include the message of hope and solutions thinking in these messages. And a lot of what we're thinking about as we're advocating for more climate and environmental education in schools, and we recognize that we need to balance that with, again, that hope and optimism, because there is a lot of bad news. We can't hide the fact. We have to be realistic, and we can't lie that there's some concerning pieces about how rapidly the climate is changing, how it's disproportionately impacting communities that had nothing to do with how climate became this bad. And so we have to recognize those truths, but hold out that hope and demonstrate the hope of, basically showing willpower and way power. There's things that we can do. There are things that experts are doing. I think this pandemic also showed, just how resilient nature is. Like CATRIONA was saying, that, within a couple of months of the pandemic, when we were really, really in lockdown, air quality in Southern California completely changed. People in India and Southeast Asia were saying they heard the birds for the first time. They were seeing stars at night for the first time.
Wow.
Just how resilient our natural systems are to come back when we're not causing such terrible degradation. But it's something that we can actually build into not just curriculum in schools, but in public education everywhere, that it's not too late. There's still so much we can do. And especially demonstrating how important collective impact is of, I think people get really discouraged of, I'm just one person on this planet, what can I do? What do my actions matter? And just really highlighting how that adds up to be so much with just that one spark, that one start. CATRIONA, it's so great to meet another nature girl from long back of, it was just something that I think several of us on this call probably had innately in us from the beginning. My first word was my dog's name, not mama or anything like that. I have yet to live that down. I've always felt this, strong connection to nature and animals, but helping other people see that connectivity and develop that interest and spark. And I think that's where my passion has come all along in my career, was working on beaches in South Carolina and talking to them about sea turtles and what they could do to help nesting sea turtles on the beach. And people who, were there on vacation and could care less about sea turtles nesting on the beaches were all of a sudden my militant army on the beach the next night protecting the sea turtles. So, finding that spark, framing these messages, we have to really come to the realization that it's not one message fits all. It's not one motivation that fits all. So everyone's going to have their different way to come to it. So that there's so much hope out there. There's so much that we could do and frame it to make people engaged and get people excited, and really show that there's a path forward together, that it's not too late. There's so much we can do. And there's so much we've already have done, and give acknowledgement to that. And there's so much more still to be done, and it's possible.
Wow, thank you for that.
And I think
yeah, go ahead.
I think especially for children too. Many people may not be aware of this, but most children nowadays spend less time outside than a prisoner in the prison yard. They get their hour outside, and kids don't get to get outside as much. And that's where you learn about nature and natural processes, and you learn to love it. You learn to understand it. And so working with kids is really, really important. And it's kind of a natural once you do spend time. And there's so many ways, taking a family vacation with your kids, go camping, turn off the TV at night, go out, look at the stars, start a little garden, start a little window box garden or something. There are lots of different ways to engage.
And
Wow,
especially
thank
having
you.
that idea that nature's not something away or to go to, that nature's in your backyard, nature's out your front door, that the world is there.
Yeah.
That there's so
Yeah.
much to spend that time outdoors, literally just out your front door. It's
Exactly.
all around us.
Exactly. Claudia,
Yeah.
what about you? I mean, you IONS has done some incredible work around connecting people to our world more. But in terms of what you've seen in this trajectory over the last 50 years, what's some of the good things that you've noticed? Mm,
A nature girl. But as a citizen scientist, I'll say that it's not just that nature's in our backyard, it's this recognition that we are actually nature ourselves.
okay.
And that science is demonstrating our connection. We come into this world loving Earth, knowing our connection with Earth, and then it sort of gets trained out of us, either by education or by, I think we're challenged by the technologies, the electromagnetic fields. I don't want to get sciencey, but one of the ways that we communicate with the planet is through these electromagnetic fields. And so one of the positive things I think that's happened is this science of biofields, which says, look, we are electromagnetic beings.
Yeah.
And we are constantly radiating signals within ourselves and outside of ourselves. And those signals get picked up by other forms of life, and even potentially by the planet. That's my belief, because I came in being able to feel Earth. I could feel the planet. I didn't think about the planet being able to feel me. But that's what science is demonstrating or suggesting. And we're hoping to prove that this is real, that through this energetic overlap with the planet, through our biofields and the Earth's energetic fields, there is actually a mechanism for the exchange of information. So when humanity overall is feeling separate, is feeling stressed out, is feeling disconnected, what if the planet can feel that? Because it's also being suggested that we're less a person than a process, and the universe is less a machine than a thought. So how we feel, Charles Eisenstein, I heard him speak about this once, and he said, if you knew the planet could feel, you would stop. And I turn it around and I say, if you knew the planet could feel, you would start.
Right.
Start being in those, we want to create, we talked about sustainability for a long time, even when we knew that it was too late for sustainability, that we're talking about regeneration.
Yeah.
If it really is all one, if everything really is connected as the wisdom traditions tell us, and as science is starting to be able to demonstrate, if it really is all one, then we have to care about our own regeneration.
Yeah.
As well as working outside ourselves. What if everyone is an activist simply by virtue of their own ability to communicate regenerative energy within themselves to the rest of life?
Right.
And that's, I think, starting to happen, because we're starting to have the science that demonstrates that this is really true. We have a sensor network at IONS. We're working with the Institute of Heart Math on, and these are global sensors that are meant to demonstrate that there is a direct connection between our inner world and our outer world. And CATRIONA, our newest one, is a tree sensor network. We want to show that the electrical potentials of trees actually reflect shifts in human consciousness.
Wow.
Towards the higher spectrum frequencies.
Wow. Wow. As you were talking, I was thinking about, the worldwide success of Avatar, right? The movie. And there's the science is now showing us that is actually true, right? That there is this interconnectedness of all things, including us. I love the fact that you brought that up. In fact, all three of you kind of brought this up, right? Where we're just not living amongst the world. We're part of the world. We're in it. We're connected to it. We're part of the whole ecosystem that's here. And that and to your point, Claudia, there's even a deeper meaning of it. There's a deeper understanding, and the science is telling us more and more and more and more about that truth. Listen, it's the top of the hour. We're going to take a short break. But when we come back, I want to kind of shift and move into maybe taking some of these truths and moving into what it looks like from an empowerment standpoint. And everybody out there, I want your questions. Please submit your questions in the chats, and we're going to try to get to as many of those questions as possible. So thank you, everybody, for being here, and we will be right back.
This April 22nd marks the 51st Earth Day. Earth Day is held in over 190 countries with billions of participants worldwide. The movement has come a long way since its start in 1970. The first Earth Day drew 20 million participants through grassroots organizing and left a powerful impact in its wake, including the passage of key environmental protections in the United States.
And you saw the quick succession of environmental laws the passage of those laws taking place, like Endangered Species Act and Clean Air Act and Toxic Control Act and a bunch of other ones that had been sitting out forever, never going anywhere. But those 20 million people scared everybody, all the people in power. And so you saw this enormous interest in the environment that was sustained over long periods of time.
Since then, years of environmental damage and climate change have produced many harmful effects and lasting impacts. Now more than ever, we need to restore our Earth.
In climate change, there's been discussion for decades now on, oh, we have to mitigate the damage or we have to adapt to the damage. But restoration is a different concept altogether, and it talks about basically recreating systems that are incredibly degraded now but could serve as a way to restore the planet generally.
Restore Our Earth is Earth Day's 2021 theme and promotes the natural processes, green technologies, and innovative thinking to restore the world's ecosystems. The 5 main campaigns that EarthDay.org runs year-round are climate literacy, Global Earth Challenge, regenerative agriculture, the Canopy Project, and the Great Global Cleanup. Through these campaigns, restoring our Earth is accessible and the vision for the future. Climate literacy is one of the ways EarthDay.org plans to build awareness around climate change and prepare future generations to be the face of a greener workforce.
Climate literacy is important for us, for jobs, for voting, and for civic engagement, tool building, as well as just really understanding the complexities of climate change and how do we solve them.
Climate education doesn't stop at the classroom door. Through EarthDay.org's Global Earth Challenge app, users can be citizen scientists through their smartphone. The app allows users to help scientists track insect, plastic pollution, food supply, and air quality data. EarthDay.org also works on the ground to help restore our Earth. Since 2010, the Canopy Project has planted tens of millions of trees across the globe to combat deforestation. To reduce waste and plastic pollution, the Great Global Cleanup encourages group and solo cleanup efforts to reduce litter in communities across the globe. The Regenerative Agriculture Campaign promotes farming and grazing practices that help reverse climate change. These practices can transform farmers into environmental and societal heroes. Personal actions alongside commitments from leaders can create collective change that will restore our Earth. This Earth Day and every day, EarthDay.org calls on you to make positive actions in your community. Every action will help restore our Earth.
Hey everybody, and we are back with our second hour for our Truth and Power series celebrating Earth Day with our panel, CLAUDIA WELSS, a doctor, I'm going to start calling you doctor, Dr. Tracey Ritchie, and CATRIONA MACGREGOR. Thank you ladies for being here. We want to take what we've been talking about in terms of truth, right? Because the whole foundation of this series is to level set everything with truth. This is the reality. This is what's going on. This is factual information, even factual information that other people don't know about, like heart math. We were talking about heart math offline and other things. And then from that place, seek empowerment, right? You know, if you're not on a firm foundation, how can you build a good house, right? I mean, this thing, parables and things like that. My first question is, and it kind of relates to what we were talking about in the first hour, and that there seems to be an opportunity right now to start necessary transformational change. What are some of the opportunities that exist that you see right now? And I'll go to you, Tracey, first.
Sure. It's a big question because there is so much opportunity, and people really need to find their path. And so I think that's a lot of what we do at earthday.org is we try to give so many different kinds of opportunities for action, individual action, collective action, community action, and of all kinds. We address issues from plastic pollution to biodiversity to climate literacy, and everything in between, energy and emissions and food. I mean, I think we could have a whole 2-hour webinar just on food itself and our relation to the food system and everything from food production and food transportation to food waste. So I think people need to find what they're passionate about, what is most relevant to them, most relevant to their community, most relevant to their livelihood, and take action in that way. I think people have different experiences and connections to nature, and whether that came from family or from their time in childhood or something that they learned in school. I think the biggest thing I learned as an environmental educator very early in my career is that I really fought this notion that, you know, we should be telling people what to do. I mean, there's just things that we know. There's things that we should know and things that actions we should take to be better citizens of this planet. But for other people to have that aha moment on their own of understanding why they're making these actions, understanding the trade-offs of different actions, and choosing a path that makes the most sense for them, and not being prescriptive in how we tell people to interact with the planet. But I think that was the other piece, is that we need to remove guilt and shame and, you know, bad feelings about these conversations of everyone's going to find their path, and that every action is great, and taking that action, and even taking that millisecond to consider their actions and consider their impacts, that's the win right there. And so, you know, there's so much people can do of if they live in a coastal area and want to address those, if they live in the middle of a country and want to talk about water, if they live in different parts where it's a farming community or a forest community, or it has to make sense for them. And so that's something I'm really proud of, that earthday.org really gives you any kind of opportunity, any topic under the sun, or the sun in energy. There's so much that you can do. And again, everybody can take an action, and everyone should take an action, and that adds up to so much.
Well, I'm struck when you say empowerment from a place of truth. I really, first of all, I appreciate that distinction. It's an important one. And I also want to distinguish between real and true, especially right now, because from a consciousness perspective, we would say what is real is all of these crises that we are facing, and the feelings of separation that so many of us have, and the feelings of disharmony among humanity. But what's real on I'm just gonna say on a physical level, is not necessarily what's true. I like the term, we are under a bit of an optical delusion, because our 5 senses tell us we are separate from this physical world. But there's a truth that the heart has access to, that other ways of knowing, you know, what ions, our guiding hypothesis is that we are all interconnected, and that when we embody this interconnection, we have access to information outside of space and time. And why that's important is because right now we are really, I'm going to say struggling, just because I can't think of a better word right now, but we're sort of struggling with incremental improvements. And earth science is telling us we don't have a whole lot of time. Like I said, over 20 years ago, we were told we have 20 years to turn it around. That has come and gone. So what we really need is non-incremental improvement. And all the great scientists have always said that it has been their intuition that has been the biggest guide for them in their scientific breakthroughs. So we know that there is something beyond the thinking rational mind that has access to more of the wholeness that we're embedded in, where the more radical and radically new solutions can come through. I don't remember exactly what your question was, but I hope that I answered it. But it just feels really important because climate change is what's known as a super wicked problem. I think we've all heard this. It means time's running out. It means the people who are trying to solve it are the same people who are creating it.
Yeah.
It means that there's really no central authority that can address the problem. So it just feels really important right now that we all connect to our own true inner authority and our most expanded intelligence so we can bring that to bear on the situation.
Right. Well, you got it. What are the opportunities? I mean, that's an opportunity that exists right now today. See, we were psychically connected. Catriona, what about you? What are some of the opportunities? And I'm sure you've got, just like Tracey, there's like, okay, where's my book, right? And all the opportunities that exist. What are some of the like high level, like important ones that you see right now?
Yeah. I want to speak to two opportunities. So one, the individual level, the incredible transformation that can happen by connecting deeply with nature. So we mentioned earlier, I've been leading these vision quests and nature quests for over 2 decades. And I've led people, hundreds and hundreds of people from many different countries, 8 different countries. And I've actually seen people being emotionally and physically healed by connecting with nature at a very deep and powerful level. Many people are aware of the story of the Buddha. How did Buddha become enlightened? He did a lot of things to himself. He fasted, he beat himself, he did all these horrible things. He finally sat under the Bodhi tree and he became an enlightened being. Many people are also not aware that the Buddha, before he was the Buddha, if you believe in reincarnation, and if you're Buddhist, you do, his life before, when he was a young boy, he came across a starving lion and her cubs, and she was dying. She was unable to feed them. And he offered his body. She actually ate him before he was the Buddha, when he was like 8 years old. And he became reincarnated. He became the Buddha in the next lifetime for his selfless act of giving. And guess who his disciples were? The lions. So I'm telling these stories because I think the first step is opening your consciousness, opening your thoughts that this could be a possibility. Trees may be really amazing beings. Animals, maybe we could learn so much from these incredible beings, and the earth and the planet herself. My ancient ancestors referred to trees as the ancestors of humankind. And there's a lot of scientific validity to that because there was no oxygen in the atmosphere when the earth was created. The plants, photosynthetic organisms, they created the oxygen in our atmosphere so that we, higher life forms, could evolve. They terraformed the earth. The earth was like a rock. The roots and trees work with chemicals. They actually broke apart the rocks and started to, form soil. So, at an individual level, we have the capacity to become enlightened. We have the capacity to learn, to become wise, to understand the truth of nature and how things work. And, even looking at, we're talking about heart math and kind of aligning ourselves with different things. Well, the earth resonates at 7.8 hertz. That's the same hertz as a meditating brain. Any hands-on healers, they go to that place in their brain. It's like the universal healing modality, wisdom modality. And that's what the earth resonates at. On the bigger picture, we're facing a huge problem right now. We are facing global calamity and catastrophe. We're in the middle of it. We're having fire tornadoes in California. We're having floods. We're having pollution. We're having all this crazy things happening. But if we partner with nature, if we learn and capture and understand and work with natural processes internally and externally, because we also need, I believe, to escape the paradigm of linear, that things are going to take a certain amount of time. I think that when we get into a certain place of consciousness, as Claudia was speaking to, we can help progress that process. But we need to begin. And the majority of the human race needs not feel guilty or shameful because it's not us. Right. I believe that this has happened because of the corporate structure and it's almost like allowing a monstrous entity to exist whose sole purpose is to generate revenue and profit and grow and grow and grow. That's not natural. That's anti-natural processes. There's no give and take, between it. But there is a solution, allowing people to come together, work together, but it has to be for the benefit of humanity. It has to be for the benefit of the planet. You can't just go out and make things and do things and destroy things because you're going to make a ton of money for 10 people. So it's really why I think a lot of people feel, oh, climate change, it's human caused. It's not. The majority of the population didn't want this to happen or cause this to happen. But we're in a society that's being driven by certain economic structures that are causing this. Good news, we can stop it. And, for people that feel bad, working in the land. One of my favorite programs is STRAW, Students and Teachers Restoring a Watershed. They have kids out there as young as 8 planting plants along riverbeds and coming back 10 years later and seeing a tree with a nest of baby birds in it. So there are all kinds of wonderful things that an individual can do. And as a society, we must do. We must change our society. We must change our economic way that we're proceeding at this time.
Right. Thank you for that. I'm thinking about when plastics were first made, right? Oh, this is going to be great. We have these plastics and you can put stuff in it and you can store it forever and da 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 da. And it was like, oh, wait a minute. This thing that we build can last forever, but it's not biodegradable.
Yeah.
And so what do we do now? Right. And this stuff was created so that people could package stuff and eat it. And it was cheaper than paper and cheaper than other things that were biodegradable and so on. So I won't go down that rabbit hole, but you guys understand. I want to take a little bit of our time to let both you, Tracey, and you, Claudia, to talk about all the wonderful work that you're doing in your organizations when it comes to things like this. Tracey, I know that there, like you were talking in terms of the opportunities that exist, there's a lot of things that people can get involved in, but one of those things is getting people educated, right? And getting them, getting the knowledge there and getting this knowledge out there for them to understand, and then they can take action, right? How is earthday.org taking on this task? Because it's a humongous task. You've grown so much, and there's so much that you're doing. So so I'm going to give you first the floor and kind of talk about that.
Thank you, and please cut me off because I could definitely talk for a really long time about this. But I think historically we've been known for so long for our toolkits and our resources and the educational content we provide around our yearly theme, around environmental issues, on our website and through social media. And we still are that. And I think with our roots, especially, and it was so nice to talk to Claudia about Dennis Hayes, the first organizer of Earth Day back in 1970, and just what our historical roots are for the environmental teach-in and bringing communities together to talk about what they can do. And we won't stop that. I think that's, our heart is there, our roots are there, and we will always continue that. But we've really had to take on a different role in the past couple of years of being not just advocates, but global warriors for everybody to have this kind of information. And so we formally launched the campaign in September of 2020 to say that we want compulsory and assessed climate and environmental education for every student in the world. And this is going to happen through multiple avenues. It's going to look different in every part of the world. Climate education has to be customized for the area, for the people, for the culture. But we need global leaders to step up and not ignore education as one piece of the solution for addressing the climate crisis. We've been talking about it since the World Summit in Rio in 1992. And there was, we're hearing now that they said education takes too long. We don't have time for that. Agreed. Education is a long-term solution, but we have to start now. And so our campaign is asking leaders who are gathering at the COP, the Conference of Parties in Glasgow in November, the annual meeting of where they talk about everybody's country's commitments to what was signed in 2015, the Paris Agreement, and that we need to say education has to be part of the puzzle. It has to be part of the solution. We need to Earth Day revolutionized the environmental movement in 1970, and now we need to revolutionize education systems too. It's not easy. It's very complicated. The biggest thing is probably going to be funding, making sure that there's a lot of education systems that are broken as is, and that there's things that we can do to retrofit those education systems so every student gets equal access to this kind of education. And then it's not just in science classrooms. We've talked countless minutes here in this conversation that this isn't a science issue. This isn't, a planet issue. This is an interdisciplinary, cultural, social, economic thing that we need to talk about, and we need to teach in the realities that we exist in. We can't have these academic silos that says, let's talk about science for 45 minutes. Okay, don't think about science anymore. Now let's talk about math for 45 minutes. Okay, don't think about math anymore. We need to show students the interconnectedness of all of this. And so we have support now from over 500 global organizations that range from individual faith institutions and local nature centers to massive global unions like Education International that represents 34 million educators across the world. ILO is part of this. We're bringing together sectors from education, environment, faith, justice, youth activism, and replicating the interconnectedness of all these systems. And so this week, we're hoping that at the World Leader Summit this past couple of days that President Biden convened, that they were talking about education. And we know that the youth are asking for that. The youth came to that summit with that demand. And that, there's several other meetings with the UN over the summer, and that by November when these countries come together in Glasgow, or the pre-COP in Milan, they're making these commitments to not just this lip service of sure, we'll do this, having plans in place, dedicating funds to pre-service and in-service education for teachers, making sure that, again, every student, especially young girls, have access to consistent education, and that we're really prioritizing students and how we address this, and that we're not saying, oh, that's too late, we can't do that, or it takes too long. We have to start now.
Wow. You're not passionate about this at all.
I mean, it's been a long journey, and it's finally, the conversations are happening. There are op-eds all over my feed this week of companies and entities and world organizations and world leaders. I mean, we had several national presidents this past week for Earth Day say, yep, this is it. This is what we have to do. So it's happening. It's on the cusp, and it's just so exciting that students, youth, citizens of this planet will finally get the education they deserve.
Wow, it's amazing. It's amazing. Thank you for that. Yeah. All right, Claudia, I want to hear all about what IONS is doing in terms of putting forth interconnected. I mean, you're a global organization, just like earthday.org, and you're doing so many wonderful things around the world. Tell us a little bit about the work that IONS is doing that relates to the pushing this interconnectivity, message and reality out to everyone, because that's one of the tenets, right, of IONS.
Yep. If you don't mind, I'm going to answer starting from a very personal perspective,
sure,
because it connects to what I just heard from CATRIONA and Tracey. My coming to work at the level of consciousness happened because I was an environmentalist, and I felt like humanity was a failed experiment. And I went to the University of California, Berkeley. I worked at the business school with corporations, and I was trying to change the paradigm of business there from within a university setting. And it was very challenging because this was in the 90s, and corporations were, yes, it was definitely profit over people and planet. It was even hard to have a conversation about it, but I really did learn there a couple of things. One really important one is that people aren't bad. It's the systems that they're trapped in that are rewarding the wrong behavior. And that comes back to what we started. I think we said there isn't room for blame here. In talking about the plastics and in corporate behavior, I remember when I learned that, I think it was President Truman after the war, said that we needed, that consuming had to be thought of as an act of patriotism. Because we had this huge production capacity because of the war. And if we stopped using it, people were going to lose jobs. And I say that because I feel like this whole evolution it's a story of expanding perception, including your example of the plastics. Brian, I love the way you said that. You know, it's like we thought we were doing a good thing initially, but as our perception expanded, we realized we needed to do something different. So humanity is still evolving, and that's super important. When I was at Berkeley, Willis Harman, who was the president of IONS, said something really important to me. And he said, Claudia, what you're doing matters, but you're addressing symptom rather than cause. And IONS is addressing the cause, in that we all know the very famous quote from Einstein, you can't solve a problem at the same level of consciousness that created it. Carl Jung says that the upheaval of our world and the upheaval of our consciousness is one and the same thing. So working at the level of consciousness, what we're doing at IONS is we are working to create a tipping point in consciousness from one that is based in separation to one that is based in the oneness of all life. And there was actually a report written by Dwayne Elgin. You might know him. He wrote Awakening Earth, and a wonderful synthesis of traditional knowledge and beyond. But he wrote a report in 1995 that was called Collective Consciousness and Cultural Healing. And in the result of all his research was that there would be an inflection point or a tipping point where collective consciousness would move from being driven primarily by our collective unconscious. And I love how Brian Swim says we were born into a pre-traumatized world. Our collective unconscious, I mean, really imbued with these frequencies of trauma. But Dwayne said that collective consciousness is going to shift. There would be this inflection point from being driven by a collective unconscious to collective consciousness, and that was going to happen in or around the year 2020. And he wrote that in 1995. And here we are in 2020, and we were talking while we were waiting to sort out the audio problems, and we were all saying how it really feels like the world is in a different place. We've sort of spiraled up. We had this awareness, but we spiraled up to a completely new receptivity. And so at IONS, we have several initiatives, but one is the IONS Discovery Lab, where we're helping people discover how they best tap into the intelligence, their greatest intelligence, the different ways. Some people, you know, how do we cultivate our intuition? I know HeartMath would say we do it by cultivating heart coherence, and that is my particular modality. Because CATRIONA, I believe you're right about that 7.8 hertz and the brain. What HeartMath has discovered is that the brain and the heart come into resonance together at 0.1 hertz. That's considered the resonant frequency of the entire body. And what's interesting about that is that 0.1 hertz is also one of the primary resonant frequencies of Earth's geomagnetic field. And that's why we say, because Global Coherence Initiative is HeartMath. Global Coherence Initiative is the initiative that says personal heart coherence, or let's say heart coherence, heart intelligence scales to social coherence, social intelligence scales to planetary coherence or planetary intelligence. And that like I said, there is this opportunity for communication through our vibrations. Not just what we do, not just what we say, but our quality of being, our vibes. Coming back to the hippie days, we were talking about that too earlier, I think, maybe before we got on the call. But so I would say attention to our vibes, and knowing that the planet feels us is something that is really central to IONS and to the sensor network that we're building, trying to change the current paradigm of science from one based on separation to one based on unity.
Wow, thank you for that. Thank you both. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, I want to talk to you, CATRIONA, about some of the things that you have personally done that connect people to this planet, and that's your vision and your nature quest. You know, I'm thinking of when I was a kid going on camping trips and that kind of thing, and how important that was as a young child, and how I looked at the world after when I grew up. So we want to take a short break, and we'll be right back, everybody.
Hi there, Sheila Applegate here with some exciting news. I've joined the incredible Soulivity team as the host of the new Consciously Awesome live show, where I will be sharing insights to help you discover your full brilliance and claim the vibrant life you deserve. To add to the awesomeness, I'm going to be inviting some of my favorite people from around the world, including many of the guests that you fell in love with on my Live Sensate podcast and Enchanted One radio show. So tune in every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on Soulivity TV, to join the fun. And remember to subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss a single episode. Have an awesome week, and I will see you on Wednesday.
You've all done autism awareness training, but what did you really become aware of? That autistic people have obsessive and repetitive behaviours, have trouble making eye contact, don't really make friends easily? It's time for that form of training to go, because what everybody needs, whether it's autistic children or adults in the workplace, is acceptance. So what I would like you to do is to think of everything that you've ever learned about autism and autistic people, crump it all up and throw it away, because this is something completely different. It's an entirely new model of training. It's about neurodiversity, it's about acceptance, and it's how autistic people like me and everyone else out there can grow to live happy and successful lives in school and in the workplace. My name's Jude Morrow, and this is Neurodiversity Training International.
Soulivity Magazine and Beyond Words Publishing want to remind you about the importance of continuing to follow public health guidelines to protect yourself, your loved ones, and your community. Please continue to wear a mask, wash your hands, and watch your distance. Please visit these sites for further information about how to stay safe from COVID-19 into the new year. Remember, love protects us.
And we are back with our panel for our Earth Day celebration. And CATRIONA, I want to go to you, because you have been doing something for a long time that is near and dear to my own heart, because it reminds me of my childhood. My dad was big on us going out in the nature and camping and being underneath the stars and fishing, catch and release. You know, sometimes we catch and eat, but a lot of times we catch and release. and just exploring, just walking and hiking and you know, that kind of thing. I think part of it was we were young boys and we were rambunctious. So it was one way to get us all tuckered out so that we go back home and But I think the other part of this was, listen, we need to go out here and explore, especially as two young boys of color, right? Because I think sometimes there's this misnomer that, oh, well, Black people don't go out and camp. And it's like, no, we have plenty of Black people that were camping. So he wanted to kind of break that myth and get us out there and being connected. You do these nature and vision quests, and you've done them all over the world. I'm so fascinated by it. Will you tell us a little bit about these quests and what you hope people learn from them?
Yeah, sure. And I love to hear your story about your childhood, and I bless your dad for doing that. It's so healthy for kids, all kids. It's just so great to be outside. It's healthy physically, emotionally, and mentally. And nowadays they've done many studies to show that it really helps kids. One of the big ways that it helps kids too, resilience. It's kind of it's so emotionally and physically and mentally satisfying that when they're older, they can go back to those memories. They can go back to those habits of maybe they're feeling anxious or stressed. They'll go out and have a walk, or look at the stars or something. And we need the earth, we're part of the planet. So I was, a little nature girl and outside. My mother always had a hard time trying to get me to come in. Catriona, come in for lunch, come in for dinner. I'd be up in the trees. She caught me once when I was 5, about 20 feet up a tree, putting a baby robin back in a nest. And I thought, why is she upset? I'm having a great time up here. But, I, like many people, was drawn into societal pressures about what food to be and what success is and all of that. I went off to law school. I practiced environmental law, but I became a lawyer, wasn't spending much time outside at all, to put it mildly. And one day I was coming home from work and I had a heavy bag, suitcase over my arm. I was really tired. It was dark. It was late. And I came around the corner. We had a little tiny house we were in at the time. And I came around into this empty lot that normally was kind of dark and hard to see. And yet this time the lot was totally illuminated. And I looked around for a light. I thought, my goodness, I can see. Where's the light? I didn't see any light. But there in the center of the lot was this gorgeous oak tree. And it was glowing like the moon had come and landed on the ground. This beautiful glow. And my heart went up into my mouth. I thought, oh my God, I'm hallucinating. I ran into the house. I shut the door behind me. My heart was like pounding. I thought, oh my God, I'm seeing things. And I opened the door. And by the way, I had a lot of mystical experiences when I was a kid, but I kind of put those behind me because everyone said, that's crazy. That's not really happening. So I kind of ignored it. I peeked out the door. I opened the door, and sure enough, that tree was glowing like the moon. And I went towards it, and all I can say is it felt like our souls connected. I felt totally embraced. I was uplifted in this moment. And then after that happened, I don't know how long I was there, maybe 5 minutes, maybe half an hour. I came back in, went back to sleep. My husband's there, woke up the next morning, got my son his, lunch prepared, walked him to school, went back to work, wasn't even thinking about the tree because it was such an unusual experience. And now I was in the real world, getting back. And then I drove back home after work and not thinking about the tree. And it was fairly light out. It was a little bit early. It was like 6 p.m. And I came around into that lot, not thinking about it. And my God, the tree had been cut. And when they chop up the tree, so it's just like splinters all over the ground. And all of a sudden, it was like these two universes collided in my mind. Kind of the more analytical day-to-day, the way we're supposed to think, and the more mystical, oh my God, a tree can have this wisdom about it. And I really felt like that message to me was that we are all more than roots and limbs and leaves and bodies. We are soulful. We are energetic, spiritual beings. And it also impelled me to leave the work that I was doing and follow this calling, to send the message to the world, to send message to others. We are an amazing place. The planet is incredible. It's so wise. It's so awesome. And it's way beyond what we can experience on Nintendo or our computers or our cell phones. It's incredible. So that's what I do now. And from leading the quest, what's been really heartening is I've developed methods, and I found that everyone can connect deeply to a tree, even somebody who never spends much time outside or never camps. I've run youth quests for kids of all kinds who just, love it outside. And I've run more spiritual based quests for adults where they're actually connecting with the spirit of a tree. I've seen people emotionally healed. I've seen people get information and answers to questions they may not have had answers to before. And I've seen them actually physically healed by connecting with the energy of a tree. And nowadays, when I was a young person in my 20s, I thought, I can't wait until spirituality equals science, because it's such a great way to learn about our world, because we are such amazing beings. I just want to say that I think that they're linked in many ways. That sometimes much of the indigenous wisdom that we thought was doesn't make any sense. Nowadays we're like, yeah, science is confirming that. We're energetic, trees are energetic, therefore we can connect with them at this very deep level. So it's an honor and a love and a joy to help people connect at this level. And many of these people go on to connect, on their own, but it sometimes helps to have a guide that can show you, be a wayfarer, that it's possible. This is an incredible planet.
Yeah, as you were talking, I'm remembering a dear friend and somebody who was on my show that airs on Saturdays, Jennifer Johnson, and she now leads these group tours doing the 500 miles to Camino de Santiago. And and as you're talking about these quests, right? These walks where you're walking through, like that part she's describing, walking through nature and all different hills and dales and seeing animals and this kind of thing, that you cannot help. Once you get through, like the first couple of hours, you're like just kind of walking. And then at some point, something clicks and you release and you come into a whole new awareness about what's happening in your own life, things that you were thinking about, relationships, profession, all that stuff starts to get clear. And it relates to kind of like, Claudia, what you were kind of talking about before in terms of this energetic connection that exists and bond to each other, our earth, and our universe, right? Where they're all connected. And that by doing these, things get clear, especially with things like this, when we're talking about climate change and trying to make environmental impact. All of that makes sense, starts making perfect sense if you didn't understand it before. Like, wow, yeah, of course, because now you're connected. With the time that we have left, again, this is all part of empowerment, right? My first question to all of you is something that I do a lot, and that is, what do we do to take action, right? What can we do right now? And so I want each of you to tell us one way that we can support environmental change, either locally, nationally, or internationally, because there's something that we can do in one of those categories. And so who wants to go first? I'll open. I won't be directed this time. I'll kind of like let whoever wants to go first. All right, Tracey, why don't you go first? Why don't you go first?
Yeah, I was just trying to think, because just one, that's hard. I think, we've talked a lot about, daily actions and habits that we can have. And I think some of those are very intuitive. And going back to this idea of corporations and like where the real responsibility lies, I think civic action is something that we're really focusing on, that there's so much we can do. There's so much we could do with our actions, with our wallets, and how we interact. But I think making sure you understand your local systems of community structure and how to communicate with people and power in those structures, of letting them know what's important to you. You know, if we're in a democratic system and we're voting for people who are our representative, we need to let them know what's important to us. And communicating with them when you're happy and not just when you're unhappy is really important too, to develop those relationships with elected officials, of saying, you put forward this thing, I'm so excited, I'm so supportive, what can I do, how can I be involved? So it's not just going to those entities when you're unhappy and complaining, because building that relationship is so important. So being civically minded of, you know, understanding how your community, what's important to your community, what are the struggles of your community, how can everybody be inclusive in your community, and how can you help amplify voices that haven't been considered enough in these conversations of when we talk about environmental issues and how we address them. How do we make sure, I love all these conversations we had about Indigenous knowledge in this conversation today. How do we respect the original stewards of our land and our resources, and how do we learn from those actions? And how do we work together, truly, authentically, collectively together, to make sure that everyone's voice is heard, and that we're making decisions and actions that are just and equitable in how they're implemented, and that we just work together. And so that's a very tall order, and that couldn't be more vague, and I apologize for that. But I think there's something that we can do, and you have to find what makes sense for you and your community to take action on, and working with those elected officials to make them part of the solution, and just knowing that change can happen and we can work on it together.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Especially, you know, I think, again, and you know, everyone, please go visit earthday.org and kind of read through, take a, you know, an hour and just kind of read through some of the information, because when you talk about like diversity, right, and equity, and that this all relates to these social economic kind of threads that are there. And so it's important for everybody to get educated and understand how all this work impacts everybody, and it impacts everybody in different ways. CATRIONA, how about you? What's one way that we can, you know, support this movement, either locally, nationally, or internationally?
Well, I do want to say something. I just want to quickly on your heels and Tracey heels just say that I think that if we get really focused on the economic issue, that changing the corporate charter and not allowing a corporate entity to exist only to drive profits for its owners, but insisting that it has to benefit society or benefit the environment. We have things like that. It's called nonprofit corporations. So I think if we just take that one step, there'd be huge change, huge dramatic change. So my message is working with trees. So for two reasons. One, for spiritual transformation. I told the story of the Buddha. I've told stories about how I've seen individuals, hundreds of individuals transform through their relationship with trees. And also trees and plants can help us heal the planet. During the Triassic period, there was a period of warming caused by a lot of volcanic activity, and the carbon dioxide was out of control. It was really hot, and kind of spinning into that situation, which was not good for a lot of species. It was the plants that saved it, a plant called the Zola and other plants, and they started pumping out huge amounts of oxygen, which started to cool the earth down. So my one hope for people would be, look at trees with open eyes, learn all that you can about them. There's a lot new science out there about how they work, what they can do to help us. And think about not cutting your trees, helping to plant trees, join a group that's doing restoration or conservation. And we need to really seriously work with the plant kingdom at this time to solve it. It's not just us. We're not alone here on the planet trying to deal with this. We have a very wise natural environment that we can work with.
Wow, thank you for that. You know, as you were talking, I'm remembering. I just saw. I love PBS. Oh, I love PBS. There was a special on the Argentinian rainforest, the part that's there, and the conservation that's going on, and it's a huge movement, and that whole region, because again, people sometimes economic things, a lot of times economic things drive other things like sanctions against wood and things that are being sent over to places like China causes a place like Brazil to ramp up their their deforestation, which affects climate change. You know, the Amazon and all that are one of the biggest producers of oxygen. So, you know, everything is interconnected. Claudia, what about you?
Yeah.
What's one way that we can support this kind of movement, you know, in our world? Oh, hang on one second, Claudia.
Okay.
Go. You were muted. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I'm going to go back to this idea of everyone an activist or everyone a change maker, as Bill Drayton of Ashoka always said. Take climate change really personally. It's more personal than recycling and carbon credits. It's actually related to each of our own inner climate. Tracey was saying, you know, don't talk to your congressman when you're mad. The reason is because that emotion is the frequency of disconnection. You know, we know this. When we're mad at somebody, it's very hard to connect with them. It's the same with the planet. This is what we know about how our biofields, how our heart connects with the earth. So pay attention to your inner climate. Hug a tree. Let the frequency of the tree enter your own body and shift your own inner climate. It's so easy to forget, but you know, think of a very personal example. When you can't find your keys and you're late, the more worked up you get, the less you have a clue about where your keys are. The more disconnected you are to what you know. If you stop, take a breath, all of a sudden it pops into your mind where you put your keys. If we remember, it's like I was in India a couple of years ago, and I was with the Dalai Lama, and he said, and it took me a second, I had to think about it, but he said, when the world looks bad, and the world does look bad right now if you really pay attention, and if you're not noticing the profound movement of consciousness that's happening underneath the surface. But he said, when things look bad, look at a flower. There's another reality. Even if there isn't a flower right in front of you, you can conjure the image of a flower in your mind. You know that flowers exist. And as soon as you focus on that, your whole physiology, your whole psychophysiology starts to change more to one of connection from lack of connection. And then move from that place. Move into the world of action from that place. I think that's the most important thing we can do, is just take this really personally and recognize the agency that each one of us has simply by managing our own inner resilience, knowing that that gets communicated out.
Wow, thank you for that. I mean, all three of you, I love this panel because I see these concentric circles that are all touching, and actually in actuality, and if you're thinking dimensional science, they're all like right there, and they're all different dimensions of talking about the same thing. And I love that. I love this conversation. Listen, we just got a quick question, and I'll probably go to CATRIONA for it. One of the questions from our audience was, what is the opposite of climate change? That's a good question.
I would say harmony and balance is the opposite, and timing. And so when I work with the Native people in Alaska, they said to me, when we see the salmon with the yellow eye come back up the river, it's at the same time at this beautiful yellow flower blooms. And so sometimes we don't need to be near the river to know the salmon are there when we see the yellow flower, because there's this balance and timing, right balance, harmonious relationship between things in the world. So I see that as the opposite of climate change, which is shifting our climate. You know, now little insects are being born early, and then the birds, when they're trying to feed their young, they've missed that opportunity. So we're losing some of our bird population. So timing, harmony, balance, the yin and the yang balance too, the feminine and masculine principles being balanced. And I don't just mean within a man and a woman, because many men that I've met, in fact, one of my favorite eco-feminists was a man. But it's finding that balance of nurturing, caring about other life, as well as moving forward.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you for that. I love that. You know, balance, timing, you know, wow. Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to rewatch that later on, because again, that's something that all of us just in a daily practice need to practice, right? And then that resonates out. One last thing that relates to support. And again, thank you all for being here. I love the conversation. Thank you for your patience in our technical issue earlier. What is one empowering thought you would like to give our audience about their connection to the world? And I'll go to you, Claudia, first.
And I'm going to go to Edgar, who, when he was in space, had this epiphany. And part of his epiphany was that love is the organizing principle of the entire universe. And we know from the heart science that heart coherence is the organizing principle. That means love, because love is the physiological signature of coherence in the body. Love is the organizing principle of our bodies. Love is the organizing principle of our bodies. It's the organizing principle of the universe. It's the answer to the question, what would love do? We are the answer to the question, what would love do?
Wow. Woo. Wow. Thank you. And Tracey, what about you? What's one empowering thought?
That's hard to follow. I would just say connection. I think that's been a central theme in our conversation today is, you know, we're connected to the planet and nature, and we're connected to each other. And so making sure that we're really cognizant of that as we think about all the issues that we have, and really, if we don't have a safe and healthy planet, then all of the other issues don't exist. And so how can we work together? You know, air, water, species, animals, wildlife, they don't understand political boundaries. They don't understand, you know, our arbitrary rules that we've put together. And so just, you know, going back to that Earthrise image and seeing this as one planet, one, you know, human race together on this planet, how can we take action and support each other in a just and equitable way to make sure that we all thrive on this planet? And that's so important.
Thank you for that. Thank you so much. These are really, really good. CATRIONA, how about you? What's one empowering thought that you'd like to give our audience?
Well, I think the one empowering thought is that we know climate change is human caused, and in fact, one way to show that is industrial carbon has a different weight than natural carbon, and we can see it's industrial carbon in the atmosphere that's risen, and natural carbon has actually lowered over the years. So it's human caused. We can fix that. You know, we caused it. We know how to fix it. We can fix that. And I'm a big believer in the internal work and the external. I think you need both. I think you need to feel that connection. We need to learn a lot. There's so much we can learn from nature. It's incredible. So we need to continue to learn, and then we need to immediately apply what we've learned. And I think having that hope and that understanding. And I always hold that within myself. We do live in a benevolent universe, people. We are held in this amazing, loving hands, if you can imagine that. And the universe wants us to succeed. They want us to succeed. Whatever your belief system is. And we will get there. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Thank you so much. Listen, I want you guys to stay right where you are, because I want to show you something that is like everything that you just said in action. And there's this young author. I don't think he knows that I'm going to do this. There's this young author, and his name is Jackson Apollo Mancini. He's 6 years old, and he wrote this incredible book, Dr. John Saves the Moon. It is an incredible book. And thank you, Jackson, for writing this. And we're actually going to be giving away some copies of this book. And you want to go to either Soulivity Magazine's Instagram site or Beyond Words Instagram site, and you can get information about how to enter and all that. But again, here's power in action, right? Where this young man felt the need, that had such a strong connection to this planet, that he wanted to write a book and got the help that he needed to write this book. So way to go, Jackson. You can come to the barbecue anytime. All right. Wow. Thank you all so much for being here. Claudia Wells from IONS, Tracey Ritchie from earthday.org, CATRIONA MACGREGOR, environmental leader, scholar, just out here doing it. Thank you. An author. Thank you all for being here. I could not have had a better panel. Thank you so much. Would you guys come back and, either individually or collectively, and we can talk some more about this stuff and how it all kind of connects? All right. See.
Thank
Great.
you, Brian Johnson.
Absolutely.
Soulivity. Thank you so much. I want to thank you for this and for introducing me to Tracey and CATRIONA.
Oh, hey, we're all one family, right? And so, we're stronger collectively than individually. And so this panel
Very
here
much.
shows the power in that. So thank you all.
For you all. Thank you.
Yeah.
Before we get out of here, I just want to remind everybody that, hey, listen, this is a continual series. We're going to be continuing to do this throughout the rest of the year. We've got another great event coming up in May. It is celebrating Asian American and Pacific Islander heritage. It's going to be Saturday, May 22nd at 2 p.m. right here on Soulivity TV and all our social media channels. So watch this space for more information on this event and all our other events. And we want to thank you for being part of this and giving us your energy. Please feel free to share this out to your friends and family, because I think this is another important topic that we need to give our world more information about. And on behalf of everyone here, our panel, everybody at Soulivity TV and Magazine and Beyond Words Publishing, again, thank you for being here. My name is Brian Wesley Johnson. And as always, I am wishing you lives full of passion, purpose, and high quality living. See you next time.